Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Jocelyn Pierce Audet. She is a certified Hakomi practitioner with a focus on assessing the body's wisdom and innate ability to heal on a holistic level. She is trained in multiple modalities in addition to Hakomi, including somatic experiencing and NeuroAffective touch. Stay tuned. We're going to find out why mindfulness is now finally becoming part of the mainstream, which has been necessary for a long time, and more about what kind of work Jocelyn does. Thanks for joining us.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all, we promised we'd be cordial.
Hi, everyone. Kristin Walker here. I am here with Jocelyn Pierce Audet. We met online in a kind of nothing to do with podcasting way, and then found out, hey, we have some interesting things in common. So Jocelyn, thank you so much for agreeing to come on my show.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So you do somatic therapy and nutritional therapy. And do you mind telling my listeners just a little bit about what that is and what your background is?
Sure. So I'm doing work with the body, basically using mindfulness in order to access our deep-seated kind of emotional beliefs, sort of the way that we originally came to view the world, usually an early experience. And most of the time, those beliefs are hidden from us. They're in our unconscious. We don't have ready access to them. And the body basically stores all of that. So through different ways of accessing sort of the way that we sit, maybe the way we turn our heads, the sensations we have in our bodies, whether it's just a kind of gut feeling, all of that can be a doorway into hidden ideas about the world and what's possible for us. So that's sort of a little bit, it uses mindfulness, and I mostly use a modality called Hakomi, which is a body-mind therapy. It's been around for 40 years, and it's sort of the grandfather of a lot of the somatic therapies out there now, like somatic experiencing, things like that. So that's sort of one aspect of what I do. And in addition to that, I do nutritional therapy. I help people sort of get a handle on unusual health issues. And oftentimes they tie in, because if you have anxiety or depression or, some kind of long-standing trauma, that will normally affect your physical body.
Right.
Things like adrenal fatigue or gastrointestinal issues, oftentimes the microbiome. So I'm trying to kind of work with people on in a multi-level way, so that, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right, exactly.
And they separately, people often work just with one or the other, but sometimes I enjoy doing both.
If someone, comes in and let's say they have dysthymia, long-standing depression, and
Mhm.
they're not sure if it's hormonal or so I just had this discussion yesterday, so it's at the top of my head about um, dealing just with that ever-present depression
Yeah.
and looking at different things. A friend of mine said, her hormones were out of control when she was pregnant, as an example,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
this degree that was horrifying. And at different stages in her life where hormonally your body would change, she would fly into rages and things like that. And she was trying to figure out, I've had all this therapy. I
Mhm.
think I eat well. Maybe it's a hormonal thing. And the problem is there isn't much, no one really knows where to go to get that kind of help.
Right. Yeah, it's not very easily found. Thank goodness for the internet and for the
Right.
ability to research this stuff, but it's still kind of hidden away. And you have to know kind of what you're looking for, and there's misinformation. But there are people out there that specialize or are really involved in that kind of thing. There's been a lot of research recently, within the last 5 years or so, about everything from diet, certain kinds of intolerances. Of course, I
Mm,
mentioned the microbiome. The gut is so involved in our emotional well-being. I
right.
mean, that's where we manufacture most of our serotonin. So, and hormones, of course, that's a big piece of it. And you can get hormone testing. You can help promote balances in the hormonal system through supplements, changes in diet, exercise, light. Even being out in nature is incredibly impactful for us. And
Right. And a lot of times it's people that are just extremely, extremely, extremely empathic and very, very sensitive.
yeah, yeah, I think that's very true.
So the way of the world becomes very loud, and you'd think as you get older, you can deal with it better. And the reality is it's not that you can't deal with it, it's that you just don't want to.
Right, exactly, exactly. I mean, there's so much coming at us every second.
Yeah,
So much media, just everything, and we're not really designed for that. Whether we're especially empathic people, but most people, it's almost like a giant experiment being foisted on the human race. We don't even know how this is going to affect younger generations yet.
exactly. Exactly. So do you see that with your work where, as people age, they that are that way, they are looking to retreat more from that busy, busy,
Well,
busy?
I think so, and I also think that as people age, if there are sort of unresolved or unmetabolized things within them, that will tend to come to the surface. It sort of asks for our attention, and so if we can turn towards those things compassionately and really slow down, be mindful, that's sort of what the somatic work is all about. Giving us a space and really slowing down, taking away distractions, the way that we kind of numb ourselves, and
Right.
kind of going in there in an empathic way towards ourselves. Often people that are empathetic, um, sometimes they're overly focused on others and not enough focus on their own needs.
Oh, absolutely. Guilty.
Yeah.
And it so feels like the opposite of and I think that it is of what the world or society tells you should be doing, because society is telling you be more on television, on your smart TV, your
Mhm.
phone, your computer, plugged in, you're going to miss out. You're climbing this ladder and you're going to miss some rungs and never make it to the top. And everything that you're talking about is, okay, just get off that ladder, because that ladder, that's not that none of that is going to get you where you think you
Right.
want to really be, or where you want to be, that's going to
Mhm.
actually be happy.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things, I just saw some kind of study saying that, the more time someone spends on social media, the more likely they are to be lonely and depressed.
Right.
So it's the truth is that we are all looking for connection. We're looking for to be seen. We're looking to be heard. We're looking for some expression of love. And we're not going to get that on a computer or on our phones. That is something biological that we actually have to have an experience of with a human being across from us or in our family or whatever. And that's sort of the bottom line, I guess. And that's why we have so much loneliness, so much suffering right now. People, like you said, feeling overwhelmed and unable to find what they're really looking for through what we're told we should be doing.
Right. Exactly. And you feel like, oh my gosh, how, I've thought this even of myself. I've thought, well, how am I going to continue to have this company and
Mhm.
do my work and support myself? I mean, it's just me. So how am I going to do that if I unplug more? Because
Mhm.
everything pushes you towards being more plugged
Yeah.
in. And I go to a spiritual place about that, and am continuing to work on that, where, you know what, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, is
Mhm.
what you're talking about. So I'm going to do that, and everything else will work itself out the way it's supposed to, because I'm supposed to do what's healing for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you brought up a really wonderful point, and that's that we can use these, the modern technology in a way that can actually support that. And doing what, bringing this kind of material out to people is wonderful that they can find it out there, because without the internet, we would be a lot more limited in
Right.
finding help. So it's a balance, really. It's a
It
balance.
is. It's an interesting balance. And I mean, you do sessions through Skype, so you're doing things online. It's such an interesting, we use social media to put the message
Mhm.
out about what we're doing. And yet here, I don't want to be on my computer all the time. It's so
Mhm.
fascinating. So you're right. You have to
Yeah.
find that, balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I've worked with people, in Europe and Morocco, and, they don't have access to this kind of thing. They don't have access to somatic therapy, so they can have it now. And that's,
Yes,
you
that's a
know,
wonderful thing. Exactly.
it's
And
incredible.
technology is what brings us that.
Yeah, so we're kind of in sort of the infancy of understanding how all this is going to work in our bodies and our psyches.
Right.
So it's kind of a figuring it out as we go.
For
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
I know. Exactly. That is exactly it. Figuring out as we go. So someone is, let's say, doing a session with you, and they're changing their nutritional approach to things. You're looking at biochemical things, and you say on your on your site, this is not psychology, this is not a psychology session. But when someone, let's say, brings up through some of the work that you're doing, emotions that have been buried,
Mhm.
what's the process for kind of handling that,
Mhm.
that doesn't dip into psychology?
Well, what I mean is I'm not doing psychotherapy. I think that's a little clearer.
Okay.
Everything about us, involves psychology. So
Yes.
I'm using sort of somatic coaching.
Okay.
I don't diagnose or treat anyone. I'm not a psychotherapist. I don't go that direction. What I'm doing basically is helping people to turn inward and self-study. And we might be sitting in a session together across from each other, either on Skype, Zoom, or in my office. And, we just slow down and we notice what's here in the present moment. Like whatever sensation they're having, whatever thought, maybe a memory or an image, and we just gently turn towards that. It's done in a environment of complete acceptance and curiosity. So we turn towards that and we just kind of follow that. We trust the body's sort of organic intelligence, that part of us is showing up for a reason, and it's got something to say. So we're not really going to be talking a lot about, things we already know about. That it's not talk therapy, although we're certainly talking while it's happening. It's more about, what can I turn towards that will show me something I don't already know.
Okay. Gotcha. Good to know how that works. Do you see this as a field that is being more accepted within any community, but especially the medical community?
Yeah, absolutely. It's becoming more and more apparent that a lot of issues originate or come hand in hand with the body. You've probably heard of John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness program and somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work. These are all sort of somatically oriented practices, modalities that are used both in psychotherapy and body work, in coaching. And it's now kind of going into more the mainstream. People are realizing that we often hold old tensions, anxieties, all kinds of things in our musculature. We might cause even disease through some of these repressed, held on to beliefs about life, about what's possible for us. So I'd say definitely it's become very much accepted.
Good, because I know a few years ago, it probably was a harder time with the acceptance piece.
Definitely. Yeah, in the last 5 years, it's been a huge, huge paradigm shift.
Right. It's always interesting to me when I talk to physicians who say they're going and doing this work personally.
Oh, I work with some. I have a couple of clients that are physicians,
Yep.
and it's very true, because they're, I think, sort of seeing some of the limitations of this more mechanistic view of how people work.
Right. How about doing retreats? Talk a little bit about what that is like with it.
Yeah. So once I've worked with someone for a while, maybe 4 or 5 sessions, a couple of months, and if they want to, I design a retreat for them where they can come. I have a farm, and I basically design it around what the issues are that they want to work with, and they have their own private space. They're able to walk on the land. And I'm sort of on call for them the whole time. We might do 2 sessions a day. We're just sort of focused on supporting what their system needs, what their psyche and what their body wants to explore.
Wonderful. All right. Last question for you. How do you take care of yourself when you're doing so much for others?
No, that's a really good question, and I sometimes get asked that. I have a really lovely network of friends and people that do this kind of work as well, and we're closely connected. We talk, and I also have my own practices. I'm also spiritually inclined, and I've always, my whole life, been involved in different kinds of meditations. I read a lot of mystics, write poetry. I'm outside with my horses.
You're practicing what you preach.
I'm practicing what I preach for the most part, although sometimes I get really overwhelmed and hectic too. I think that's kind of part of my nature. I sometimes take on too much.
Right. I understand that.
And the other kind of thing that I notice in this work, because part of it is that I'm not trying to fix anyone. I'm not trying to figure them out or make a diagnosis or anything like that. I'm just with them as another human being and with an open heart. One of the kind of precepts of working in this Hakomi model is that you're cultivating a state of loving presence. So I'm not really looking for anything in particular to happen.
Right.
And what that does is it kind of opens up the space for the subconscious of the individual, because people feel really safe when they can feel that you're not trying to change them or anything like that. So there's something that happens on a kind of a limbic level where, there's this sort of mirror neuron thing that happens, and we can both be in this space without a lot of pressure.
Nice. That's the space you need to be in to have those unconscious, wounds come to the surface.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I totally believe that as well. And it's a wonderfully nourishing thing for me, because I get to experience that too. I get to see people feel that. And sometimes, people may have gone through most of their life without ever having a place that's safe where all of them can show up.
Right.
And I feel really privileged to be able to create that.
Wonderful. Well, where would my listeners go to find out more about you?
They could go to my website. The website is www.compassionateselfawareness.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I can spell it if you like, but
no, that's okay. I thought you were going to give the Jocelyn Pierce Audet.
Yeah,
that definitely needs to be spelled, but not the other one you just gave.
all one word, compassionate self-awareness, and that gives a description of everything I do. And I'm happy to work with people on Skype, and I just love the whole field of somatic work.
Yeah, I do too. You probably will have a new client in me.
Well, thank you very much.
if you want me as a client.
Of course, I would love you as a client. You'd be privileged.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're so welcome.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive-aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but I oppose it.
Good boy.